Good evening, poetry videos once again. This is for the grade 11 South African curriculum according to the CAP standards for English home language. I am going to be going over midterm break. Again, the basic meaning of the poem, figures of speech, poetic devices, words that need explaining, um, the theme, the tone, basically anything that you can be tested on. So, like I've done in all the other videos, I'm going to read it and then I will go through the annotation. Midterm break. I sat all morning in the college sick bay, counting bells, nulling classes to a close. At 2 o'clock, our neighbours drove me home. In the porch, I met my father crying. He had always taken funerals in his stride, and Big Jim Evans saying it was a hard blow. The baby cooed and laughed and rocked the pram when I came in, and I was embarrassed by old men standing up to shake my hand and tell me they were sorry for my trouble. Whispers informed strangers that I was the eldest, away at school, as my mother held my hand in hers and coughed out angry, tearless sighs. At 10 o'clock the ambulance arrived with the corpse stanched and bandaged by the nurses. Next morning I went up into the Rue. Snowdrops and candles soothed the bedside. I saw him for the first time in 6 weeks. Paler now, wearing a poppy bruise on his left temple, he lay in the 4-foot box as in his cot. No gaudy scars, the bumper knocked him clear. A 4-foot box, a foot for every year. So just a couple of notes of clarification. This was an actual event that happened in the life of the poet. As an adult, he is writing the poem and looking back on the event with hindsight. And yet he's written the poem very simply, very straightforward, in the way that he processed it as a very young teenage boy. Again, when they talk about a foot, it's a unit of measurement. So it's not the system that we use here in South Africa. So we talk about meters. So a foot, a yard, a mile, that's not really what we use. So when they talk about a foot, it's a unit of measurement. The main thing about the poem is the ambiguity. So the reader is left wondering what is happening in the first couple of stanzas, and it's really only towards the end that you start to piece together bits of the puzzle. And this is what happens generally when somebody has undergone major stress or trauma or grief, sorrow. It's almost like you have to make sense of what they're saying, what they're telling you, what they're going through. And one of the ways in which the poet does it very successfully is with enjambment. That whole idea of loss of control, the words are running away from him, his thoughts are not under his control. Just excuse me a minute, I need to get my cat sorted out. Sorry about that. So, like I said, there's a bit of ambiguity. You're kind of backwards and forwards, what's really happened. Midterm break gives you the idea that he's waiting to go on holiday, and yet his father's crying, people are shaking his hand. He's not really actually sure what is going on. So I think the poet does that quite successfully. And again, it's in the simplicity of the poem. There's no major outburst of emotion, there's no exclamation marks. He's trying to recreate what that person himself went through, what his thought process would be like, etc. So let's go through the poem. So like I said, midterm break. Obviously, like in all poems, the title is important. In this case, it's important because it's misdirecting. A midterm break is usually a holiday between terms. So you get the idea that he's going on holiday. And yet it says that he's sitting in the college sick bay. And then they use the word nulling. So the bells that are busy ringing to inform the people about which class it is, the end of the day, people are, coming to get picked up. Nulling is usually used in, not sinister, but it's a very somber word. Bells usually knell as an ominous sign, so something bad is happening. Um, it's not the bright, happy, tinkling sound of bells like for a wedding or a birthday or, the birth of a child or something like that. Knell is usually used for funerals or, bad things that have happened. So the reader's now a little bit confused. You're telling me it's a midterm break, but why are you using such a dark word? And then the neighbors drove him home. So again, it doesn't really seem too out of place. Notice. In the porch, he met his father crying. He had always taken funerals in his stride. Now you will notice that I've underlined that line in grey and I've written at the top of the notes 1950s. So this event happened during that time period, and that is when there was a very, very firm belief that men do not cry, they don't show exaggerated emotion, they need to be the strong ones, the anchors. So again, you've got this idea something's not right. And Big Jim's Evans is saying it was a hard blow. Well, what was? Again, we don't know. Just like the boy wouldn't have known. And then that tension and suspense is broken by the baby cooing and laughing and rocking the pram. So there's a younger sibling, it's a baby, has no idea what's going on. It's in the pram, it's cooing, it's laughing, it's unaware of what is going around it. So he comes in, he's embarrassed because now old men are standing up and shaking his hand and saying sorry for his trouble. So again, in a very rigid sort of social culture where, the elderly people, remain seated, people older than you do not get up for you, you stand up, you greet first. This is now, coming to the point where he realizes, no, something is very, very wrong. And the whispers are going around. He can hear people saying that, no, he's the eldest, he's been away at school, his mother's holding his hand, she's coughing out these angry, tearless sighs. And then at 10 o'clock, the ambulance arrives. So then he mentions the corpse. So not the body, not his sibling, not an aunt or an uncle or nothing like that. The corpse, very clinical, very clean, stanched and bandaged by the nurses. So stanched merely means clean, sanitized, bandaged. So again, during that time, a wake was a very familiar practice. So once the body has been prepared for the funeral, they allow people to come and pay their last respects, to view the body. Some people still do it today, certain communities, certain cultures, but it used to be quite a big thing during that time. And then we notice that the boy only went up the next morning to the room. So he's been at home the whole day, the whole evening, and now he goes up the next morning. There are snowdrops, which represent purity, innocence, sympathy, hope, and candles soothed the bedside, so it made it seem softer, less hard. I saw him for the first time in 6 weeks. So this boy has been away at school for 6 weeks, and then he notices that he's paler and he's wearing a poppy bruise. So the bruise on this boy's head looks like a poppy on his left temple. Temple is the sides of your head, just past your eye. He lay in the 4-foot box, as in his cot. No gaudy scars, gaudy, standing out, harsh, bold. The bumper knocked him clear. A 4-foot box, a foot for every year. So that's when we seem to get the idea that this is the middle-aged sibling. So the boy, the narrator, the poet, is the eldest. There's the baby in the cot, and his 4-year-old brother has been hit by a car. Okay, they refer to the bumper. Okay, there's no scars. It just hit him hard enough to kill him, and it's almost like he's sleeping. Okay, there's something peaceful about it. And then he says in the very last line, a 4-foot box, a foot for every year. So the reason that line is standing alone is because that is the really harsh realization. So this is what almost makes it worse, okay, that this child was 4 years old. Okay, the length of the box represented the age of the child. Okay, so ambiguity. So we've got midterm break, which implies holiday, but yet he's waiting in the sick bay. They use the word nulling, which is ominous, has a bad feeling. His neighbors drove him home, and then he sees his father crying. So these are the things that are throwing the reader off. This is what is niggling in the mind of the poet, and this is what is so unsettling. Nothing is really stated directly. Okay, the old men are standing up to shake his hand, and amidst all of this, the baby is cooing and laughing. So it seems like everything's the same, but it's not. Okay. I've also highlighted the enjambment, so the run-on lines, to indicate the runaway thoughts that this child has. Okay, this young boy, this young teenager, he's trying to process everything, but everything seems to be happening so fast. Okay, so there's that feeling. Okay, cooed is onomatopoeia. It's mimicking the sound that the baby makes. We've then got assonance, so drove home. Ambulance arrived, so we've got the repetition of vowel sounds. We've got metaphor, poppy bruise. They're comparing the bruise on the boy's head to a poppy. So a poppy is a 3-petaled flower, and the petals are really big and rounded. Okay, so it's poppy bruise. We've then got a simile, as in his cot. So the way that the boy is lying in the box is similar to the way that he used to sleep in his cot. We've then got alliteration, 4-foot box, foot for every year. So that repetition of the sound. You will also notice 4-foot, foot 4. So there seems to be a mirror image. Okay, like I said, the standalone line emphasizes the sadness, the grief, the harsh realization. Spoke about the snowdrops representing purity, innocence, sympathy. We've then got the snowdrops candle soothed, the repetition of the sound, okay, which is sibilance. It slows down the reading. And why does this matter at this point in the poem? because this is when the boy has worked through some of the issues. He is now approaching the child, and it gives that calm, relaxed atmosphere, which is what the snowdrops and candles do. They make the event seem softer. The boy is now calmer. Okay, there's only one instance of enjambment compared to stanza 3, 4, and 5. Okay, so the sibilance, it slows down the reading. He now has the moment to process it. Okay, so that is the basics of the poem. Just a little bit of the society and cultural background. Obviously, the boy is at boarding school. The last time he saw his brother was 6 weeks ago, which also adds to the sadness. And like I said, very simple poem, very straightforward, but very, very effectively highlighting sort of the beginning process of grief, when things just seem to get away from you. So tone is somber, okay? It's very serious sadness, if you want to call it that. We've then got themes of death and grief and a rite of passage. This young boy has now had to come to terms with a tragic event, and he now needs to grow from that. Okay, so this is a milestone. It's something, a trial that he needs to overcome. So, things like that are usually a rite of passage. So, yeah, that's the basics of the poem.